Hey everybody, it's Lights Camera Accolade back to you again with another bonus episode. This time we are enjoying a special selection from Sarah for her birthday. So as always, this is just a little preview, but if you'd like to hear the whole darn thing, come around and visit us at Patreon/Lights Camera Accolade and become a supporter. Thank you and enjoy the listen.
Movie, wild ride. I kind of feel, no pun intended, I kind of feel like it's the original, or at least one of the original, like who knows in pre-code Hollywood, but like good for her type of movies, you know, in a lot of ways, a revenge fantasy against being powerless in this sort of patriarchy and then being able to overcome that. So I'm thinking along the lines of Midsummer, or Promising Young Woman, sure. Gone Girl, like anything where you're just like, you know, it's not right, but she did what she did, you know, and there's some interest in all of that. I will say I enjoyed it. So cards on the table. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a fun time. So.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Will Hayes must have, like, this is specifically what made him go, we got to start enforcing this law. Between this and the Mae West movie that I believe came out like the same year, and 42nd Street with all those bare legs. Like, Hayes was like, I
like to think it was all one weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, just one really bad weekend for William Hayes.
Mostly, I think Barbara Stanwyck is really lovely in this. Like, she's excellent.
So good. And I'm glad that we saw her in this. We'll see her later. I think Double Indemnity is the main movie she's in that got nominated for Best Picture. So we'll see her in our main series. But from my understanding, there was a movie critic, I think he worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, who had said something along the lines of, if you've never seen Barbara Stanwyck in a pre-code film, you've never really seen Stanwyck.
Oh,
and
sure.
The roles that she had initially in those, they're often described as like she was way more hard-boiled in those than she is even in like the noir and stuff of later years. So I'm glad that we saw her so we can have something to compare those performances to. Pre-code is just like a wealth of movies. Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me because there's such a humanness to her character. Yeah. Regardless of what you think of Lily as she, you know, quite literally sleeps her way to the top. There's such just a complete humanness. Part of that is how like Stanwyck plays her, but also just like how she's written, and she kind of is allowed to like slouch around the screen and that kind of thing. And there's room for that in her character versus, I don't know, a lot of the roles for women that we're already starting to see. There's a polish to them that I can see that particularly for as we get into noir, like, and start talking about like femme fatales and all that stuff. Which I can only assume that's what Stanwyck is doing in Double Indemnity, where there's kind of a level of artifice to the women that we're seeing on screen that is just not present here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more sometimes subtle like depth to what is going on in her range of actual emotions as she just uses all of these men. Because I think the movie with Sending the Second Book, right, about suppressing sentimentality is recognizing that she still hasn't quite done that. In some ways, it's probably setting up for the ending, but I think there's so much in her performance that does suggest that she's doing what she has to, but because she still is that person who grew up in her dad's speakeasy, who is like surviving. And I think that's why her continued relationship with Chico is really nice for me to see. Obviously, their relationship to some degree changes, but she's the most human that we see her, even in the very beginning when she refuses to let her dad fire Chico, kind of her safety net for a little bit of her humanity to some degree. At least that's what I see into it. Obviously, it's not the main point of the movie or anything like that, but I think that is both in the script to some degree, and then her performance builds on that. And I do want to give a little bit of background on Barbara Stanwyck. Her life in a lot of ways parallels some of the early life of the character in this movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if she was picked for that reason or if that's just what enabled her to bring more depth to it. But she was orphaned at a very young age. I think she was like 4 or 5. Ugh. So raised in foster homes and was always working, because this is another reminder, it's like child labor laws didn't exist at this time. Jeez. And she eventually made her debut as a Ziegfeld chorus girl, which we know from having watched The Great Ziegfeld and done a little bit bit of research, things going on backstage were not the most savory of environments for a young girl. And she was only 16 when that happened. So yeah. And for the next several years, she worked as a chorus girl. She performed specifically midnight to 7 a.m. in nightclubs, which, you know, that's generally the rowdier, more shady crowds that are going to those. And eventually, you know, she started becoming a dance instructor and then got her way into plays and was then able to make her breakout into actual like Hollywood and stage productions and stuff like that. But those formative years up through her teenage, you know, years and into her early 20s sound like they are not too dissimilar in what she may have had to navigate. So just thought that was an interesting element that brings a little bit more to that performance.
Mae West had a similar background, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, which you would know because you watched multiple Mae West
and now
little
I am
documentaries
about to do the
or whatever.
same with Barb. No, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very interesting spin on power dynamics and the different methods to attain power, you know, personally, professionally, and whatnot, and the different avenues that are open to us based on our characteristics, personalities, talent sets.
Sure.
Obviously, Barbara is a gorgeous woman, and she uses that to maximum effect as she tries to strike out and create a life for herself in, as you said, a really hyper-patriarchal, brutal environment. And knowing what we know as the viewers about her background and her inputs, you know, the one, you might say, positive male influence in her life is telling her to essentially become a sociopath. You know, it kind of makes sense the way it unfolds and the choices that she makes. And I really personally liked the ending. I liked the way...
I was hoping someone would talk about this.
No, we
I'm
have
curious
to.
how everyone feels.
Yeah, and people might have different perspectives on this. Like, people might really like the trajectory that she was on and respect everything she overcame. And I totally understand that in a way. But I so appreciate the last like 5 minutes where she's in the boat looking at all the belongings she's earned. It's kind of like a great Ziegfeld moment, again, to mention him again, of like, what is this all for, you know? And then it dawns on her that this guy who different from all the rest, except maybe John Wayne, which that would have been interesting if she stuck with him early on, but she opts to kind of give someone a chance. And I think that that is kind of nice ending to an otherwise pretty brutal career of seduction and disregard.
I can give some background on the differences in the ending. And luckily, this ending that we saw was the limited release version that was found due to finding that negative in 2004 that restored a lot of the not Hays Code changes. The way that it was filmed was like, okay, we'll have this kind of ambiguous, she goes back, maybe she learned something from this. But the one that released, wide release to theaters, was that she essentially loses everything and then returns to her roots, goes back to her hometown where she's just like content to live a modest lifestyle because they really wanted to double down on like sexual vices are not rewarded at all. So that ending sucks. So I'm glad that
like, how did they make her lose everything? They like dumped her jewels into the ocean. Like, come on.
Yeah, like the ship goes down, she loses Chico too. Like, I don't know how that one plays out, but so I'm okay with this one where she is realizing, okay, well, you're pretty much being a sociopath and exploiting everyone that you can for your own gain. But what does that leave you with in life in terms of, you know, having any kind of meaning or connection or anything like that? So I'm okay with this ending, even if it feels a little bit forced by the Hays Code to be like, no, you know, have it be ambiguous and she gives up the money or whatever. But yeah.
Sorry to any Nietzscheans out there, but there's a reason the Nazis love that guy so much. And it's because the logical conclusion of that philosophy is to basically exterminate anyone who's imperfect. So I don't know if you take it to its extreme,
which, you know, not everyone does.
Right.
If you want to know something else that's really crazy for a change that they made, speaking of that Nietzsche philosophy, the German guy's advice to her was a significant change in the released version of the movie. Instead of him being the catalyst for her doing this, he is a little bit more like the moral voice of the film.
Of course.
So I have in front of me.
I'm not surprised.
It's like a totally different movie.
Yeah, like this movie would have been like, why were people so upset about that? So I have in front of me the two versions of his big push for her to go out into the world. And I'm going to read through the original and then I'm going to give you the altered version.
God,
and then you guys just like see what differences you pick out.
Circle the 6 differences in this.
Yeah, circle. Exactly. Okay, so the original is him speaking to Barbara Stanwyck before she leaves the father's speakeasy and everything, as Jake described in his summary. So he says, "A woman, young, beautiful like you, can get anything she wants in the world because you have power over men. But you must use men, not let them use you. You must be a master, not a slave. Look here." Nietzsche says, all life, no matter how we idealize it, is nothing more nor less than exploitation. That's what I'm telling you. Exploit yourself. Go to some big city where you'll find opportunities. Use men. Be strong. Defiant. Use men to get the things you want. So that's the Hays Code. William Hays did not touch this. The altered version.
Oh boy.
A woman, young, beautiful like you, can get anything she wants in the world, but there's a right way and a wrong way. Remember, the price of the wrong way is too great.
Oh my God.
Go to some big city where you'll find opportunities. Don't let people mislead you. You must be a master, not a slave. Be clean, be strong, defiant, and you will be a success.
Wow.
Do you see any differences?
Oh my God.
Reminds me of like after big protests after a police shooting when Democratic politicians come out and they're like, we need to vote harder.
It's the all lives matter response.
Yes,
to
exactly.
Yeah. No, it's very, very rough. So those were obviously the ending and then that speech were two huge changes. And then most of the things that were too explicit, they just kind of cut from the movie. But those two things, I think, very explicitly change the tone and the journey of the movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, just to take the male gaze for a second, because I liked in that other movie we watched at one point when the girls were talking one way to the guys and then talking another way amongst themselves about how stupid they thought the guys were, essentially. And it was kind of cool to watch a movie this early on where a little bit like Promising Young Woman reminded, that's a great analogy, where they're very much knowing the power of seduction that they have over some lower functioning men. And she's using it like repeatedly throughout here. And it's cool to see the tables turn because, you know, it's that oft repeated criticism that, you know, men who are dogs in terms of their sexual behavior are just playboys, what have you, boys will be boys. But a woman gets a scarlet letter, you know, if she has multiple relationships or whatever, what have it. So interesting to see the power in that because human beings that are intelligent and capable and driven find ways to live life and to achieve what they want. And it's just interesting to see different strategies for how to go about that. But I wonder, like, from your guys' perspective, because I feel like you are in a better position to talk about this. Do you feel like that strategy or that portrayal is in keeping with or adjacent to your ideas of feminism, or where does it all land for you?
Boy, what a question.
Yeah. You're like, do you condone her behavior?
Basically.
Say it with your full chest.
Is it woke or non? I need to know what card to fill out. I need to know what to think. I just need help.
I think any movie that is more accurately reflecting like the humanity of a woman, that's an inherently better role.
Right.
Anything that is grappling with how complicated that is, to me, speaks something more true. I'm not going to talk to you about like the morality of it because I don't think that's necessarily relevant. But yeah, there's more of a truth to this. You know, we've seen this story with Stanwyck herself, apparently, and a number of other actors. I think it's also something that got touched on in Stage Door and that kind of thing. There's a awareness of the interiority of these women in these movies that I think as soon as you start to discard that, it moves further away from reality and makes those women not people to the same extent. So I think
Frank Capra,
regardless of Frank Capra, who I think frankly gets kind of like worse at this as he goes along.
I like the Mr. Smith. I liked what's her face?
Yeah.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yeah,
she was good.
But Yeah, I think that's not like something that you can necessarily weigh, especially in fiction. But I think that the awareness of the fact that it's complicated means more, I think.
Yeah, same. I'm a big fan of that. Anything that's kind of taking a more critical lens to what reality is that, truth be told, most people are aware of, right, to some degree. But then a lot of media or the way that we talk about those things is to hide it, right? Is to pretend that those things aren't there. So anything that instead shows it and has someone navigating through it without being just a full caricature or a device to tell you it's good or bad, I just really like from a storytelling point of view. And then for her as a character, and a lot of those movies, right? Like a lot of those good for her type movies, they're put into situations where their options to make their own choices or have power over their own lives are very limited, whether it's because of the society that they're in or whatever else. And so a lot of these choices, which we would then be looking at like, well, are they immoral? Are they ethical? Are they kind? You know, all of those, it's kind of like, well, they're making the choices because they are deciding that they have to, more from a survival lens rather than one of malice. It's not like we're just watching the sociopathic decisions of someone who just wants to hurt people. So I guess it's not even quite a revenge fantasy like some of the other movies are. Using art to be a revenge fantasy, it more is just like, look, she's in a terrible position. This German dude was like, hey, you can turn this around real easy because you were fortunate enough to be beautiful and smart. And so she does.
It just goes to show how stupid the Hays Code is, where the kind of myopia and how they're handling this in terms of like, oh, there's a reference to sex on screen. This makes this movie morally deficient. Whereas I think that there is a real sensibility in this movie of, even though it's positioning Lily, the main character, in a position of power for 90% of the movie, at no point does it really consider the possibility that this isn't somehow kind of like rotting her on the inside. The movie says discard sentiment in the sense of like, that's what the book that she gets is. But the actual movie itself is like, but that's a bad thing. You actually do want to keep the friend that you brought with you from your home. Side note, Teresa Harris, who plays Chico, is really excellent. And it's a shame that her entire filmography is basically made. And the other unfortunate part about that too is that I feel like this role, even though she was a maid, had way more nuance and humanity versus the future maid roles, because the Hays Code once again. But yeah, so it's like this movie is not saying that like, oh, actually Lily was a badass bitch for sleeping her way to the top and isn't this cool? And I think too, some of these times where we see like these movies, like I'm thinking the many divorce movies that we've seen where they kind of like get back together or whatever, where sometimes that ending feels a little bit too pat. And in this case, I think, frankly, the only thing I would change about this ending is the ambulance person saying he has a good chance. I think if you chopped out that line, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's a level to this where it's like really the thing that she has to get past so that she can be in a relationship is that closed offedness. And the thing that seems to make a difference almost in the relationship at the end is the fact that he is to some extent her equal. Yeah. Even if she has to like recalibrate to like come at him essentially a second time, there's a real like, I want to prove to you something else, which is interesting because he kind of sets her up for this thing and she's like, well, fine, I'm going to go through with it then. But yeah, I think there's something there. I haven't quite worked through my thoughts about it.
Everyone else is so transactional, her relationships with them. Whereas with George at the end, he just bleeds this kind of genuineness that I think kind of cracks through her almost like PTSD built armor that she doesn't know how to process at first, it seems.
I think their relationship and looking at how he differs from the other men is important from the get-go, because obviously she's still manipulating literally the entire board of directors to try and get what she wants after the like murder-suicide that happens in her apartment and stuff. And he's the one who sees through it. And he's not outwardly saying that he knows how she got to the point where she's getting to, but he essentially is calling her bluff from the very beginning. So he goes into spending time with her and everything with eyes wide open. And you can see it in the way that they speak and communicate. She speaks pretty much as she was speaking in the very first scenes that we see her, where it is rough around the edges, more formed by that like speakeasy type life, while they're dating, while they're married at the very end. Like throughout the relationship, she is more of, you know, who she actually is, versus the other men. We very specifically see scenes where she's like baby talking them and she's finding out what buttons she needs to press to get them under her spell, versus with him, she is just herself and he is fine with that.
You know what it is, really? And I just thought of it as you're talking so eloquently, and it's combining with my thoughts and stuff. And this is just an interpretation, so it might not be correct. But it makes me think of how Maurice whipped that Princess Bride character into shape in the last half of that movie, and it felt very like aggressive and just out of place. What George did was he had a beautiful stallion in this woman who had been running circles around every other man in her life, and he realized that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, and so he really killed her with kindness. Because I thought when he came on the scene, it's going to be like Maurice. He's going to be like, you're a dumb hoe. Like, this is how it's going to be. Like, I'm going to learn you some. But instead, he was just like, I love you. You're amazing. I'll do everything for you. Yeah, all the other guys were doing that, but most of the other guys were ugly and old. And so when George did it, it worked. And ultimately it got through.
I don't think it's because they were ugly and old. I think
it is just that honest, like that level of honesty.
Yeah. But do you see what happened? Like patriarchy won in the end, you know, because in a sense, by her abandoning her sociopathy, yes, it's very human, but she's going into a traditional role.
There's a movie, there's a version of that movie where that happens, but what happens at the end is that they get married and happily ever after and the bank doesn't close. The fact that George also kind of gets what for at the end is, I think that undermines that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if that's really what it was, that he would be...
I'm not talking about George, though. I'm talking about the message of the movie. Like, yes, the character also makes sacrifices, but the message of the movie being that actual fulfilling life experience is going to be with another person. I think that's true, but I think you could also take the stance that that is her surrendering to a traditional interpretation of her gender role on some level.
I can see that argument, but I think there would be a happily ever after if that was the case, and that doesn't feel like even if he survives, they're still going to be destitute.
You know, he's rich though. Like I think they were.
They're certainly going to be in worse, more complicated situation than they are
currently. Live in a pool house at some duke's estate in Norwich. Like there's worse things, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's more like, look, you don't have to close yourself off completely to sentimentality and happiness, and not all men are terrible, right? Sometimes you can have like an actual partnership where, once again, the movie set them up as equals. And to Abby's point, both are in a worse situation than they were before they met each other through all of this, but they're still making the decision that they have found happiness in each other. And I think more than him not being old and ugly, I think that is also the difference in terms of when he's offering everything. Yes, she's still using him and she's still in that mindset of like, get everything she can, hence the misses sort of thing. But he's offering that knowing a lot more about how she got to where she is and the way that her mind works versus all of the other men who were like, oh, you really love me and I'm the one in power. I'm the one with control here.
Versus she's innocent. And,
she's innocent and under their control when she's really the one pulling the strings versus George, whatever, in this Cortland. I was like, Buck, whatever his name is.
Series of fake, like 30s to 40s names.
Exactly. I think in his offer is recognizing his own vulnerability and that she's the one with the power in this relationship. And he's essentially just being like, hey, I will do everything in my power that I can to keep you.
So counter to that, why did she not stay with John Wayne then? Because it seemed very much that he was being similarly respectful and encouraging to her. And it's obvious that they had a relationship going on. Is it that she had not reached that level of enlightenment yet? Or was it that George is rich and John Wayne wasn't?
I mean, I think she was still very much in survival mode at that point. She'd only climbed 2 floors by that point. You know,
like that's game.
Not. Yeah, exactly. She's not guaranteed the safety of the life that she literally went out to try and take at whatever sacrifice to what her morals would have been otherwise, right? Without that goal in mind. And then she gets to that point, and Cortland is essentially her equal. She still isn't, I don't think, recognizing that she doesn't have to be in that type of self-serving survival mode anymore until,
she's rich.
You know, obviously the ending sequence. And then it doesn't matter that they don't necessarily have the stability anymore.
Also, John Wayne's there for 2 seconds and we know nothing about
nothing
him.
about how that all played out, other than he seems sweet. You know?
That's what I'm saying. She could have given that a chance. But she said, I ain't got a secure enough nest egg yet.
I think the implication is that any man who is ready to jump into bed with a woman just is not maybe the best relationship prospect.
Yeah, no, and to that point, kind of like what we were just saying, even though we don't see John Wayne's relationship with her, we can assume because of what she's doing still at this point before and after him is she's not presenting herself honestly, right? So if you kind of fall under her web, under false pretenses, like she manipulated you into it, then that's a very different thing, right? Than kind of meeting face to face, you getting called out for your bullshit and then starting
this
a relationship.
This is a great segue
it's very
into
different.
Something else I want to talk about. I'm so glad you mentioned that.